My name is Miranda. I'm 30 years old, and for the last decade, I've been chasing one goal with single-minded focus, owning a home of my own. Not a condo, not a shared apartment, not someone else's guest room. A real house. Something I built through my own discipline and sacrifice. I live in Chicago, where real estate is expensive and competition is fierce. But I had finally done it. 10 years of working 2 jobs, skipping vacations, clipping coupons, and saying no to dinners out. I saved almost $400,000. I was proud of that. More than proud. I was ready to make an offer. The house I had my eye on wasn't extravagant. It was a modest 2-story brick home in a quiet neighborhood on the south side. Nothing flashy, but solid. It had a small backyard space for a home office and even a porch swing out front. The asking price was just under my budget, and after months of touring and tracking listings, I knew this was the one. My partner and I had already mapped out where the furniture would go. I had mentally planted tomatoes in the yard. We were 2 days away from submitting our offer. All I needed was to wire the down payment. That's when everything fell apart. I logged into my savings account that morning with the same routine as always: 2-step verification, password manager, secure connection. But what greeted me on the screen didn't make sense. My balance. It wasn't 6 figures. It wasn't even 5. It said 0. At first, I assumed it was a glitch. I refreshed the browser, closed and reopened the app, tried from my phone, then my laptop. Same result. I felt my heart drop into my stomach. I checked my transaction history, desperate for an explanation. 1 wire transfer, all funds, gone. The recipient account was unfamiliar. My hands were shaking. My mind tried to come up with rational explanations. Fraud. A banking error. Had someone stolen my identity, I couldn't breathe. I remember standing there in my kitchen, barefoot, still in pajamas, the smell of burnt toast lingering from breakfast. My whole body felt cold. 10 years. 10 years of control and restraint and pushing every dream off until later. All of it just gone in a single click. I called the bank, but the hold music was unbearable. Every minute felt like I was slipping further into something I didn't understand. I remember whispering the word no over and over again, like a spell to undo what I was seeing. When the representative finally answered, I could barely speak. The words came out slowly and heavily. I don't even know what I asked first. The woman on the line said she needed to escalate the issue. She sounded calm. Too calm. I wanted to scream. This wasn't just a technical problem. This was my future, my safety, my sense of control. And just like that, everything I thought I had built gone. Not misplaced, not borrowed, stolen. I just didn't know yet who had done it, but I was about to find out. Growing up in my house felt like living under constant surveillance long before spyware ever entered the picture. My parents ran our home with the precision of a military operation. My mom, a high school English teacher, brought the same strict rubric she used to grade essays into every corner of our lives. My dad, a financial planner obsessed with control and outcomes, applied a spreadsheet logic to everything from meal portions to weekend plans. There wasn't a single part of my life they didn't curate. Clothes had to be pre-approved, haircuts were scheduled quarterly, and always with the same stylist my mom trusted. Any attempt at self-expression like dyeing my hair or wearing jeans with holes was met with lectures about image discipline and how nobody respects a girl who looks messy. I wasn't allowed to hang out with kids my mom thought were too loud or from families that didn't go to church every Sunday. Any invitation had to be submitted like a formal request, followed by a full parental background check. Books were pre-screened TV limited to 2 hours a week, and I didn't have my own phone until I turned 17. Even then, it came with parental tracking apps and monthly audits of my texts. My bedroom was technically mine, but nothing in it really was. They had a master key to every drawer. Every diary I ever kept ended up confiscated and quoted back to me during arguments. Privacy was something I read about, not something I lived. Then there was Zachary, my younger brother. 4 years behind me and somehow always ahead in their eyes. He had noise-canceling headphones, a flat screen in his room by age 10, and no bedtime by 12. If I came home 10 minutes late, it was a crisis. If he skipped dinner because he forgot someone brought him food to his room. I once got grounded for rolling my eyes. Zach painted his skateboard on the living room carpet and got praised for being creative. They called it structure. I called it suffocation. But I didn't argue. Arguing made things worse. My mom could debate you into emotional exhaustion, and my dad would weaponize silence until you apologized just to break the tension. Their favorite phrase was, "We're doing this for your own good." I stopped believing that sometime around age 13, when I realized they only saw two futures for me. Either I became the obedient daughter they'd molded, or the family failure. I remember once wanting to join the drama club in high school. I liked writing. I liked imagining lives that weren't mine. But drama club met after school, and that meant I'd miss my scheduled piano practice. When I asked, my mom didn't even pause. She just handed me a revised weekly schedule and said, "Nice try." By senior year, I stopped asking. I just followed the routine. Get perfect grades, don't talk back. Smile in family photos. Pretend it's normal. In college, when people talked about helicopter parents, I used to smile politely and stay quiet. What I had wasn't hovering. It was full-blown air traffic control. They didn't just circle. They landed, stayed, and directed every move I made until I found a way out. They believed raising a child meant designing one. I spent most of my childhood trying not to make ripples in their carefully constructed world. Looking back now, it's almost ironic. They tried so hard to engineer a life where I'd never make mistakes, and yet their obsession with control became the biggest mistake of all. I wasn't just overprotected. I was suffocated in the name of love. And the scars from that kind of parenting don't show up in photos. They show up when your bank account vanishes and you already know who did it. I got my first job at 16 bussing tables at a diner 3 miles from home. I told my parents it was for experience, but really why? It was the only way I could breathe. The $20 bills I tucked into the bottom of an old shoebox felt more like freedom than anything else I'd ever known. By senior year, I was juggling schoolwork and secret plans to apply for colleges outside the city. My parents expected me to commute from home and attend a local university, but I applied to an out-of-state tech program without telling them. When the acceptance came, I held the envelope in my hands for an hour before opening it. I didn't end up going. Not because of fear, but because the scholarship wasn't enough, and I wasn't ready to take on that big. Still, the act of applying without permission lit something in me that never went out. Instead, I enrolled in community college paid for by the money I'd saved from waiting tables and working retail. I moved into a tiny studio apartment with no air conditioning and floors that sloped slightly to the left. I loved every inch of it. It was mine. My bed, my groceries, my schedule. I called my parents once a week and kept the conversation light. I gave them just enough information to keep the peace, but I stopped asking for permission. By the time I turned 22, I had transferred into a 4-year university and was deep into my computer science degree. I worked part-time in the IT department, fixing broken printers and resetting passwords for professors who forgot their logins every Monday. I kept saving. Rent was cheap, and I cooked most of my meals at home. While my classmates spent weekends bar hopping, I was taking freelance coding gigs and learning everything I could about cybersecurity. Graduating with honors felt good, but landing my first full-time job at a tech company in downtown Chicago felt better. It wasn't flashy, just a junior developer position at a mid-sized firm. But it came with a paycheck, benefits, and a sense of momentum I hadn't felt before. I created a new spreadsheet the day after my first paycheck hit House Savings Emergency Fund retirement. Every dollar had a job. Every choice I made pushed me further from the version of me my parents tried to keep contained. I stayed in that first job for 3 years, earning promotions and pay bumps through sheer effort. I didn't ask for favors. I didn't rely on anyone. When I finally upgraded my 12-year-old car, it was because the engine failed and the repairs cost more than the vehicle was worth. Even then, I bought used paid in full and celebrated with takeout sushi in the parking lot. At 27, I moved in with my partner, which cut my rent in half and doubled my peace. She respected boundaries, understood my obsession with spreadsheets, and never once asked me to explain why I checked my account balances so often. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had both love and autonomy, and I wasn't giving either up. I kept living simply and saving aggressively. No splurges, no designer, anything, just quiet discipline and long-term thinking. My goal was clear: own a home by 30. I didn't care if it took a decade. I wanted to walk into a closing meeting and know every cent had come from me. No co-signer, no guilt, no compromises. I didn't know then how badly that dream would be tested, but I knew I'd built something real, something no one could touch. Or at least, that's what I thought. The first red flag was a notification from my bank that I didn't recognize. It popped up late one afternoon while I was finishing up a project for work. The message was simple, but it made my stomach drop: new login from an unrecognized device. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe it was me. Maybe I'd accessed the account from my tablet or from work without remembering. I even laughed a little, telling myself not to be paranoid. But then, 2 days later, it happened again. This time it came through as both a text and an email, and I hadn't logged in at all that day. I opened my banking app and checked my activity. Everything looked normal. No missing funds, no strange transfers, just the usual deposits and savings allocations. Still, something about it didn't sit right. I called the bank. The rep confirmed the logins were real. Both from inside Illinois, both recent. She offered to lock the account and issue new credentials, but since no money had been moved, I told her I'd just changed my password. But that didn't ease the feeling crawling up my spine. It wasn't just the logins. It was the way my laptop had been acting sluggishly for weeks. Slow boot-ups, apps crashing, and browser tabs refreshing for no reason. I chalked it up to age, the way people blame creaky knees on the weather. But this was different. I felt watched, even though I couldn't explain why. That night, I ran a standard antivirus scan, but it came up clean. I wasn't satisfied. I downloaded a more advanced forensic scanner used by cybersecurity professionals. It wasn't something most people kept on their machines, but I knew how to use it. I ran the scan and left the laptop on overnight. In the morning, the results made my blood run cold. There was a program running in the background that I had never seen before. It didn't appear on my installed software list and couldn't be deleted through normal means. According to the report, it had access to my keystroke screenshots, browser history, and even email drafts. It had been active for months. And worse, the install date matched exactly to one weekend I remembered far too well. 4 months ago, my laptop started freezing. During a visit home, I complained about it over dinner. My dad perked up and offered to take a look. He said he used diagnostic tools for his clients all the time and could probably fix it. I hesitated, but let him take it to his office while I chatted with my mom and helped fold laundry. He brought it back 2 hours later, proud and smug. The thing had run faster since, so I didn't think twice. Until now. I sat staring at the results, heart pounding as the timeline fell into place. He'd had physical access, he had the tech skills, and he'd known exactly which apps I used for banking. I opened my browser history and felt sick seeing just how much had been captured. Passwords, notes, and bookmarked mortgage listings, all of it exposed. That's when the cold realization hit me. My parents didn't need me to tell them anything. They already knew. Every financial move I'd made for months was an open book to them. All that privacy I'd fought for, guarded, sacrificed for it, had been pierced without my knowledge, without my consent. I called a friend of mine who worked in InfoSec and walked her through what I'd found. She confirmed what I feared. This wasn't parental control software. This was stealth-grade spyware, the kind used in corporate espionage. Someone had installed it directly onto my machine and configured it to transmit data remotely. This wasn't curiosity. This was surveillance. The horror wasn't just in the betrayal. It was in the precision. They knew exactly when I was about to make an offer on the house. They'd seen every balance, every email, every form. They didn't guess. They watched. I couldn't breathe for a moment. I sat on the couch, holding the laptop like it might bite. I felt violated in a way that had nothing to do with physical space. This was my mind, my plans, my hard-earned independence siphoned through a machine I'd trusted, and I knew in that instant who was behind it. I just didn't know how far they had already gone. I logged into my main savings account, fingers trembling against the keyboard. The page loaded slowly, like it somehow sensed what was waiting for me on the other side. My balance read 0. Not a typo, not a temporary hold. 0. I stared at it for several seconds, refusing to believe what I was seeing. I blinked, refreshed, closed the app, and reopened it. Still 0. My breath caught in my throat, and for a second, I thought I might pass out. I opened the transaction history, heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. One line stood out like a siren. A wire transfer. Every last cent sent to an account I didn't recognize. No warning, no request, no confirmation. Just gone. 10 years of savings disappeared in a blink. I covered my mouth with both hands and stood up so fast the chair tipped over behind me. I paced in circles, then back to the screen, hoping it would magically change. I wanted this to be some elaborate banking error or fraud from a stranger I could fight. But the transfer had gone through clean, authorized, not flagged as suspicious. No rollback pending. The air in the room felt thick, almost unbreathable. I could hear my partner calling from the other room, asking if I was okay, but I couldn't respond. My knees buckled, and I sat on the floor, numb. I was trying to think, trying to problem solve, but my mind had gone blank, except for one deafening thought. They took it. They took everything. Every skipped dinner out, every side hustle, every holiday I didn't travel. Every quiet, lonely night spent telling myself it would all be worth it once I had a place of my own. All of it stolen. Not lost, not borrowed. Stolen. Anger started rising slow at first, like a match catching dry grass. My whole body was shaking. I felt rage and disbelief and this hollow sort of ache that hit deeper than anything I'd ever known. I had done everything right. I followed every rule, planned every detail. And somehow, someone still decided they had more right to my money than I did. And the worst part was, I already knew exactly who. I drove to my parents' house with a kind of calm I didn't trust. Not numbness, not rage, but something colder. Focused. I rang the doorbell, even though I still had a key. My mom answered, surprised to see me on a weekday. I didn't wait for small talk. My dad was in his study as always. He looked up, smiled like nothing had happened, and asked what brought me by. I shut the door behind me. I told him I knew what he did. I said it quietly, not as an accusation, but as a fact. He didn't deny it. He just sat back in his chair and called it a necessary decision. A family choice. He said the money would give Zachary a real shot, an elite MBA, a startup, something about generational impact. My mother came in behind me and folded her arms like she was bracing for a storm. They talked about protecting me from bad timing, about how the housing market was peaking and I'd regret tying up my liquidity. They said they were safeguarding the family's long-term interests. It sounded like a board meeting, not a conversation with their daughter. I didn't blink. I waited for them to finish, then told them they didn't get what they thought they got. That wire transfer they made? It was just a fraction of my savings. I had already moved most of the money out to a new account with no online trail. In person. No notifications. No flags. For a second, my dad looked confused, then furious. My mother's face went pale. I told them I'd suspected something weeks ago and started preparing. That I'd seen the pattern, the slip-ups, the two specific questions. I told them the spyware tipped me off. The silence in the room felt thick, almost reverent. I let it hang there. Then I said if they didn't return what they took, I'd press charges. And I meant it. They could call it family duty all they wanted, but I called it what it was: fraud, theft, betrayal. And for the first time in my life, they realized I wasn't asking. I was deciding. I wasn't the obedient daughter they thought they still had. I was someone who had outmaneuvered them, and I could see it land in their eyes, that awful dawning recognition. They had underestimated the wrong person. The next morning, I walked into the police station with a folder under my arm and a purpose I didn't feel the day before. I wasn't shaking anymore. I wasn't overwhelmed. I was done being the quiet daughter, the easy one, the one who absorbed damage without response. I sat down with the detective and laid it all out. The spyware logs, the wire transfer receipts, the timeline of login alerts and physical access. I kept my voice steady, just the facts. She nodded as I spoke, asking questions, taking notes, and at the end, she said something I hadn't expected. This isn't rare. Family financial exploitation happens more than people think. She recommended I hire an attorney while they opened an investigation. So I did. I found a woman who had handled tech-based financial abuse cases before, and she didn't flinch once during our first consultation. She said my evidence was strong, my instincts were sharp, and if we moved quickly, we could freeze the account the money had been transferred into. That's all I needed to hear. I spent the next few days gathering everything: bank statements, screenshot archives, metadata from the spyware app. I documented every conversation I could remember every time I felt something was off. My lawyer submitted a temporary injunction and filed a civil suit for fraud and unauthorized access. We didn't wait for apologies. We filed for action. What surprised me most was Zachary. He called me late one night and asked if it was true. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting. Then he said they'd offered him the money as a gift, but when he hesitated, they pressured him. Told him it was already done. Told him not to question it. He said he didn't want any of it, that he'd write a statement if I needed. I thanked him, and for the first time in years, I believed he really saw me. Not as the uptight sister who always played by the rules, but as someone who'd been fighting in silence longer than anyone realized. I wasn't just fighting for the money anymore. I was fighting for the right to own my choices, to name what happened without being gaslit back into silence. And this time, I wasn't alone. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with plain walls and hard benches that didn't match the gravity of what was happening. I sat beside my attorney, calm on the outside, a storm just beneath the surface. Across from me, my parents avoided eye contact, dressed in their best attempt at normalcy. Opening statements were fast. My lawyer spoke clearly. No dramatics, just facts. Unauthorized access. Theft. Surveillance without consent. Their attorney leaned hard on parental concern and claimed fiduciary intent. It didn't matter. The truth had too many receipts. When I took the stand, I didn't waver. I told the court about my savings, my planning the spyware, and the wire transfer. I kept my answers sharp. I didn't cry. I didn't apologize. I looked my parents in the eye and told the truth they'd always tried to deny. The forensic analyst testified next. She explained how the program worked, how it was installed, and when. She matched the install date to the exact time my father had taken my laptop. She showed the court logs, screenshots, and timestamps. My parents' attorney had nothing to counter it. Then Zachary took the stand. He didn't hesitate. He told the judge about the pressure, the manipulation, and how he'd refused the money. His voice was steady. His words landed like a hammer. My parents stared straight ahead like none of it applied to them. When closing arguments ended, the judge called a recess. I held my breath for the entire break. I didn't let myself hope too hard. When we returned, she read the verdict like it was already carved in stone. Judgment in my favor. Full restitution of the stolen funds. An additional penalty for punitive damages. Permanent injunction against future access to my accounts or devices. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I just let out a long breath I'd been holding for years. My parents didn't speak. They looked smaller somehow, diminished. Their certainty shattered in front of the one thing they never counted on: accountability. Walking out of that courtroom, I didn't feel victorious in the way movies show it. I felt clean. I felt clear. I had stood up for myself, and the system had stood with me. For once, the silence didn't belong to them. It belonged to me. And it meant peace. 2 months after the court ruling, I closed on a small blue house on a quiet street just west of the city. It had creaky floors, a deep front porch, and a garden that needed work. I loved it the second I stepped inside. Not because it was perfect, but because it was mine. Every corner, every key earned and untouched by anyone else's control. Jessica and I moved in together officially that same week. We unpacked slowly, sleeping on a mattress on the floor and eating takeout by candlelight. It felt like building something new, not just a home, but a boundary between then and now. For the first time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I wasn't explaining myself. I was just living. My career changed too. After the trial, I started speaking at tech events about personal security and digital autonomy. My experience, once something I tried to bury, became the foundation of a new role. I joined a cybersecurity firm focused on protecting vulnerable users from online abuse. I worked with survivors-trained social workers and developed tools to track and block surveillance tech. It felt purposeful. It felt honest. Jessica's design firm grew quickly, and she opened a downtown office. We'd sit on the porch in the evenings, laptops closed her feet in my lap, our dog snoring nearby. We talked about everything: marriage, future travels, paint colors for the guest room. One evening, she reached into her sweater pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I didn't cry. I just said yes, and we toasted with warm cider and leftover pie. I still talk to Zachary. Not as often, but real conversations now. He's in school working part-time, building his life from scratch without handouts. He told me he feels lighter even if things are harder this way. I told him I understand completely. My relationship with my parents is distant but civil. We exchange holiday cards. They know not to ask about money, about the house, about my work. I don't offer much, and they don't push. That's the boundary I drew, and it holds. Sometimes I think about forgiveness not for them, but for me. Letting go of the anger doesn't mean forgetting. It means not letting it sit in the passenger seat of my life anymore. Healing wasn't dramatic. It didn't come all at once. It showed up in small things: the first time I paid the mortgage without flinching, the first time I opened my laptop without double-checking for spyware, the first time I slept through the night without replaying everything. It showed up in laughter, in deep breaths, in quiet trust that wasn't shaken by fear. Freedom, I learned, isn't something someone gives you. It's something you take back one decision at a time. I built mine brick by brick, line by line, every step chosen. I stopped trying to make my parents see what they'd done and started focusing on what I could build without them. This life, this house, this career, this love is not the result of their control. It's the result of my refusal to stay quiet, of saying enough, of choosing myself. And that's what I want anyone listening to remember. You are not selfish for setting boundaries. You are not wrong for choosing peace. You get to decide what stays in your life and what no longer fits. That choice is your freedom. And no one, not even family, gets to take that from you.